Sketches of a Black Cat. I love the title. Love the picture of your dad. Ron Miner has written a wonderful story here, a story of a night-flying World War II pilot and artist. And I have to ask you, it's gone through a few iterations, this book, as you've gotten more information. We're going to get around to that. But in the beginning, like so many dads, your dad didn't talk about his war experience.
That's true, he did not. And I think our family was pretty typical for 4 kids. None of us really asked the questions that we probably should have. And when he passed away at 92, I kind of believed I might have lost that chance forever to find out about this very important part of his life.
Didn't he give a hint or two early in your life, when you were about 10?
He did, and in fact, the first memories I have of that would probably be a little earlier than that, but maybe 6 or 7. He had taken me over to a file cabinet in our basement and pulled from it an old manila folder, and inside were all these wonderful images of planes and soldiers and jungles that were exciting stuff for a kid, you know, and I would sneak down there with friends at times, and we'd go through it. And one day I went down and the cabinet was locked, and I didn't see him again as a young man.
And you had a similar experience later on in life that kind of reminded you of that. You know, your brother.
Yeah, you know, Mike and I, my brother Mike was pretty instrumental in a lot of our discoveries, and so he went with me a year later, and we went through some things again in that same house, and he found some boxes of letters, much like Gail's story, about 100 letters all in mint condition written home, and a wealth of new information and stuff in there that I was not aware of when I wrote the original book. The original book was kind of, I guess I conceived it as sort of a family thing initially, and I was surprised myself that it seemed to catch on. People seemed to like it, and I was lucky to get some press and things, and so I just felt like there was more to it. I was learning all the time about this squadron. I started meeting some of the guys because of the original book.
So tell me, sketches of a black cat. What is a black cat for those who don't know? And what was your job? What was your dad's job?
He was a pilot, Navy pilot in the South Pacific. Black cats were a pretty unheralded group that flew at night in PBY Catalinas painted entirely black. And the idea was that they were so slow that if they didn't do something to conceal themselves, they were very vulnerable.
And what was their job? They did all kinds of things.
They did pretty much anything the Navy could dream up. But the two principal things they did, certainly a lot of patrol missions and a lot of reconnaissance missions, and they would go out 10, 12 hours at a time sometimes, very long flights, in the dark with very rudimentary radar, but they had some. And they would generally try to locate enemy positions on land or in the water, call in help and light them up with flares when they could, and if they couldn't do that, would go on themselves. They had 4 bombs, and they would do the best they could to take them out. So all this happened at night, and again, they had flame arresters. They did everything they could to get as invisible as they could be.
And how did you find out about your dad's take on all of this? I love that he did artwork. He did amazing things, but he talked about this within this. So how did you write the book to bring out his story?
Well, you know, as we said, I didn't know a lot about it until we gathered as a family out there in Massachusetts to kind of start going through these things, have a service and a ceremony together. And as we were going through some of his things, we started, actually Mike found the first box, but we started finding more and more of a trove of World War II materials that we just did not know anything about. And there was, you know, maybe 1,000 photographs, all this writing. Some of it had dates, 1942, 43, 44, places like Guadalcanal or Tarawa, or these names that I thought, holy mackerel, this is important stuff. His whole story's here someplace. I just need to figure out what it was. And the keepsakes of every kind, scrapbooks, 70 years old, most of this stuff. So it was a phenomenal find, and there was enough of his writing there that I felt I could do something with the artwork and a story and bring them both together.
You brought some artwork with you. Tell me about this.
Yeah, he did a combination of watercolors and pencil sketches in between missions. And they had a lot of downtime out there in between missions, you know, and they would get into Navy mischief and trouble, and maybe found a few beer bottles from time to time. But he also found some time to do a lot of writing and sketching, and so that's how I was fortunate enough to find out all this.
Can you imagine what it must have been like having moments of all this boredom and downtime, and then just absolute terror, some of which he writes about? You're amazing. It's amazing when I read it that he made it back.
I kind of feel the same way, and in fact, one of the most dangerous aspects was, in addition to the night flight, was the rescue missions that they did. The second tour was primarily rescue. The whole effort had moved so far north that they flew mostly in the daylight now, and a lot of our pilots were, you know, making major attacks, and they would lose planes, and PBYs and Catalinas, you know, would come in and were responsible for being that safety net for those guys. And landing at sea was not an easy business.
No. And I understand that that type of PBY is still in use today after all these
years. A little bit, yeah. Not as much as a few firefighters out there still use them, but I think there's somewhere around 10 or 11 in flyable condition, so there's not many.
So how did this finally involve other people and get you to rewrite the book?
Well, I was very fortunate to have at my very first book signing an individual named Alex Catlow, and he walked up to me with a veteran's cap on and a cane and a book under his arm. And within a few moments, he smiled and just turned around and showed me on his back the logo my father had designed for the squadron on his jacket. And he lived here right in Salem. I mean, who would have ever guessed? So he was instrumental in pointing us at a whole bunch of other guys, and I found one in San Francisco, one in Washington, one in Medford, another one that I just visited, 100-year-old Bob Pinkney down in Yountville. We went to a winery together. He can still go up and down stairs.
I love it. And you made a point of trying to tell me if you had anything you could tell people today about getting these stories, what would it be?
Well, it's just so important to, and I think everybody among us would agree that the stories are just leaving us so fast. We're losing these veterans at 400 or 500 a day. And so if you're lucky enough to have a loved one that's still alive and, you know, a survivor, if you can, in a gentle way, to ask a question or two and see if they're, I've found most of these guys pretty forthcoming at this time in their lives. They sort of have gotten to a point now where they feel like there's a legacy there that they would like to share. So I would encourage you to try to get the ball rolling a little bit, see if you maybe get lucky like some of us have, and find this wonderful story, because those legacies are going away.
Well, I have to, a small bit of a confession here.
Okay.
After I read this and read his words and read your beautifully interwoven tale with his, I kind of fell in love with the guy.
He's a handsome devil,
what a character, what a guy, and what a brave person, and just extraordinary under the circumstances to do what he did and leave that treasure trove as you described it.
Yes.
Sketches of a Black Cat. Ron Miner, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.